15% of my clinical practice in the last 5 years have been people who've been driven out of their minds by their politically correct colleagues. I'm serious. And so one was a social worker, and one was a university employee, and the other was a bank employee. And these were sensible people, you know, and they were driven mad. One of them was driven mad by this happened. I swear to you that this happened. So this is at the Toronto Dominion Bank. So she was tortured by an email exchange between her superiors about the term flip chart. And so because they didn't like the term flip chart, and the reason for that, apparently, I didn't even know this, but there's always insults you don't know about, so I guess you learn something every day. Flip is apparently a pejorative that can be used to describe Filipinos. Who knew? And hypothetically, there were some Filipinos who weren't very happy with the word flip chart, and so I received from my client an email string of 13 emails describing flip chart and its absolutely oppressive consequence for these hypothetically offended Filipinos, and they decided to ban the word from the bank. Well, this woman was a refugee from Eastern Europe, from East Germany, and you know, she'd lived through the horrors of the totalitarian East, and well, she just had no way of processing this and couldn't reconcile herself to working in an organization where that sort of thing could actually become a priority. And so there was that in the background. And then I got word from another client that the University of Toronto was going to make anti-racism and anti-bias training mandatory for its staff. And that really irritated me because, look, really, you're really going to subject your damn employees to political re-education? You really think that's okay? It's like it's not okay. And so not only is it not okay, but the theory upon which the damn re-education is based is bogus. So all these people talk about this test called the implicit association test that hypothetically shows that people are biased against members of whatever group isn't their own. And there's a fair bit of debate about what that damn test means in the scientific literature, because one of the things that happens is you're faster in associating negative words with a race that isn't yours than you are at associating positive words with a race that isn't yours, for example. But we don't know what that means. It might just be a novelty thing, right? Because novel things for human beings are somewhat dangerous and negative, although they have a positive aspect. And so we don't know if people are doing this association because they're afraid of novelty, or if they're, or for why they're doing it. And it's not a very reliable test anyways, which means if you give it to the same person more than once, you don't get the same results. But that doesn't stop anybody from claiming that it's a valid indicator of your unconscious racism. Now, you think, and then worse, because now there are educational organizations that have sprung up all over that offer to educate your staff out of their unconscious biases, even though there is no evidence that those unconscious bias training programs work, and there's substantial evidence that they actually make the problem worse. Maybe because people don't like being labeled racists for their implicit attitudes, and maybe because they don't like being trotted before a mandatory anti-racism and anti-bias training program to sort out their souls by their erstwhile employers. And the Human Resources and Equity Department at the University of Toronto is a much more malevolent organization than that. And I'm saying that partly because I found out eventually what equity means, right? Because what the hell does that mean? And for those of you that run organizations or happen to be ensconced within them, you can be sure that your Human Resources and Equity Department is a social justice warrior fifth column, and you better watch the hell out. And I'm warning you about that, and I know what I'm talking about. So anyways, they did go forward with their anti-racism and anti-bias training program despite my complaints, and despite me pointing out that they were taking advice from the Black Liberation Collective, which is an organization of I don't know how many people, but it's run by it was organized by two women who are unsavory, is to say the least of it. One of them is a black suprematist who has announced publicly that white people are inferior because they don't have enough melanin in their skin, and hypothetically melanin is this chemical that enables you to transform cosmic energy into wisdom. And she's tweeted some very, very nasty things. She was also the woman who called a black speaker from Ethiopia at the free speech debate a coon, so that tells you exactly what sort of person she is. And then the second one who established this group is under investigation by the University of Toronto Student Union for embezzling $300,000 from the Student Union, which was 10% of their total budget, and organizing anti-racism demonstrations every time someone tries to call her on it. And they have a website on which they posted their support for let's call them non-violent ways of transforming Canadian society because of its appalling, corrupt and oppressive nature. And that's the people that the University of Toronto Human Resources and Equity Department are taking advice from. And when I called them on it, they said, well, we don't agree with everything they say. So, yeah, well, maybe you shouldn't be announcing the fact that they're serving as policy advisors to you, because a person who's a bit sensible might think that if one of the major administrative departments of the preeminent, perhaps, educational institution in Canada is taking policy advice from you on how to train their employees, that might indicate that you have a little bit of support for their goals. But no, that instead of that becoming the issue, what I've been doing has become the issue because I'm not going to use the pronouns that radical leftist social justice warriors who are bent on dominating the linguistic landscape insist that I use. And that's the state of the modern university. So, anyways, I posted these videos on September 27th, and within a week there was 2 demonstrations at the University of Toronto. One formally criticizing me, which wasn't very well attended, and then another, a free speech rally that students organized spontaneously. It was organized by a student from Hong Kong who has reason to be interested in the issues of free speech, let me tell you. And I was invited to speak along with Lauren Southern of Rebel Media, and when we got there and were speaking, the professional activist types came out en masse, and they had organized large loudspeakers, and so every time someone, it was an open mic session, by the way, we could have talked, so I was going to talk, and then Lauren was going to talk, but then the mic was available for anyone who wanted to speak. Anyways, they brought these huge loudspeakers and blasted white noise at us and drowned me out with cries of shame, and unplugged the microphone and ran off with it. And then this culminated, quite interestingly, this culminated with an attack on Lauren Southern by one of the professional activist types, which was captured on video. And then after the attack, this person was enraged, you know, and I actually had a tiny bit of sympathy for the person, because people get upset at rallies saying, you can imagine that someone gets upset and does something stupid. It's like, yeah, well, you know, that's not very bright, and it wasn't very bright, and they were charged by the police for that, by the way. But the worst thing that happened after that was that this little horrible person, who's been named Smuggling Pup, and is now infamous on the internet, did something that I felt was far more appalling, because the first person was consumed by anger, let's say, and okay, whatever, you're impulsive and you did something stupid, but you can kind of relate to that, because you know, you're impulsive and you do stupid things too. You're not quite that stupid, but probably, you know, if you look over the course of your life. So then this little Smuggling Pup person came up, the police rushed in to stop this from happening, and this person rushed forward with this terrible, terrible grin on her face and said, "I didn't see anything, officers, I didn't see anything, nothing happened here." And then she smiled like that, which meant, there isn't a damn thing you can do to me if I lie outright to your face. And then she gave Lauren Southern the finger and wandered back into the crowd. Well, she was later charged by the police because she had swiped passerby's telephone after accusing them of being white supremacists. They just happened to be wandering by and stopped at the conference. And anyway, she's pretty famous on YouTube now, I would say. So, and I would also say justly so. Anyways, well, you know, that's correct, if I would say. She lied outright and believed at the same time that there was nothing that could be done about it, and gloried in that, and that's not good. And so anyways, that attracted an awful lot of attention. I would say there's probably 4 million people that have watched that on YouTube now. Something like this has become an unbelievable YouTube phenomenon. Since I released those videos, there's been 140 press articles all over the world, mostly in Canada, but all over the world. It's been news for 8 weeks. It's like, what the hell? You know, you get your 15 minutes of fame by making some outrageous claim, but to have this going on for 8 weeks is absolutely unparalleled. And I would say, It's not like the attention is shrinking. The attention, like for example, I was on a program this week by that Dave, I think I mentioned it, Dave Rubin's program. He has about 300,000 YouTube followers, and I'm going to go talk to Mark Stein in December, and also a guy named Joe Rogan, and so it's going to be a tremendous amount of American attention paid to this particular issue. And so, well, so the next thing that happened was that the university sent me 2 warning letters, and the first warning letter basically said that I was responsible for following university policy and for following the legal requirements that are laid out in the Ontario Human Rights Code, and that I was to cease making my comments, announcing my intention not to use these gender-neutral pronouns. And when I got the letter, I read it, and the first thing that happened was they outlined some of the things that I said. And so I looked at the letter, I said, look, you should take this letter back because you didn't do a very good job of writing it. Because if you're going to accuse me of something, you should actually accuse me of what I said instead of this sort of paraphrase nonsense that you put at the beginning of the letter. I know why you're doing this, and it's fine, but you should get the letter right. But they weren't smart enough to take the damn letter back, so I got it. And then 2 weeks later, they sent me another letter, which was worded more strongly. The letters were interesting too, because, of course, I wasn't certain that my interpretation of the legislation was correct, not being a lawyer, for example. But I read the policy guidelines on the Ontario Human Rights Commission website, which by the way, the Ontario Human Rights Commission is the most seditious and dangerous organization in Canada, in my estimation. If we had any sense at all, we would abolish it instantly